Podcast City Network. You're listening to The Everett Lee Show.
Welcome to The Everett Lee Show. I'm The Everett Lee. I want to give a quick shout out to everyone that follows my social media and, of course, Podcast City Network, the official host of The Everett Lee Show. Today on the program, my guest is responsible for the editing of FGW Shockwave, Future Great Wrestling. You can catch FGW Shockwave every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on the Future Great Wrestling's YouTube channel. I'm want to welcome to the program today, Michael Neri. How you doing there?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Before we started recording here, I was talking about the display you have in the back there that you've had time to organize and get everything situated since we've been on lockdown since this COVID-19. What else have you been doing with your time?
I have a tendency to get involved in a lot of different things. I don't do idle very well. And so, I'm an educator by trade. And so, doing a lot of remote learning and distance learning and stuff with my students, and just kind of keeping track of grades and making sure they're doing okay and everything else like that. And then, obviously we can't do, new matches and stuff like that for FGW. So, I've been trying to put together, the best of matches and things like that we do each week, and putting those together. So that takes up a little bit of time. And then I just do all kinds of different stuff between gardening and woodworking and everything else. Like I don't sit still. And so it's been a trying couple months for sure. But, at least everybody in my immediate vicinity is healthy and safe. And that's what matters most of all.
That's good. Keeping your time occupied, man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure a lot of people have been doing stuff to occupy their time. I know I've been busy here with talking with a lot of talent here in the last few weeks, especially with FGW talent. I've been talking with them and just everybody in between that I've had on the show here. But everyone, when I've talked to everyone about FGW, all the talent and stuff, and they've always, when I talk about how I like how everything's put together, they've mentioned you off when I talk to them off camera and off the record. Your name would come up, and I said, I think I was talking to Harley, or I forgot who I was talking to, but they said he's responsible for how FGW is put together. He would be someone that you can talk to. And I said, all right. So pretty much made this happen here today. And with the information and stuff that we were talking before we did this today, you mentioned that you teach. What do you teach?
Yeah, so I've been teaching for the past 20 years. I'm actually an English teacher by trade, and then about 8 years ago, the school I work at, Hamilton High School, they decided to do a media program and asked me to help run that with another teacher. And so I've been doing that for the last few years. We do daily announcements for the school, weekly announcements, interviews, different things like that, just cover sporting events, athletics, different things, just basically the idea is to try to control our message and try to market our school because there's so much good stuff going on. Just trying to promote some of that stuff and everything else like that. So, so I have, just a little bit of media background. I'm not formally trained in any way, shape, or form, never went to school for it.
Right.
No degrees, no classes, no nothing. It just kind of learn on the fly and problem solve, on the fly as we do it. So
that's the best. I think that's the best way to do it. Just do it right on the fly there. I've been messing with audio and video since 2005. I've been messing with different programs that was around back then. I think some of it's still around. I'm not sure. I've not went back to see. And one of the programs I use, even still to this day, is Audacity when I edit my podcast, because I've always used it, and for like an open source program, it's pretty damn good.
It's pretty amazing. And, you know, I tell this to my kids all the time. Even in the time that we've started media, you know, like the things that we could do then versus what we could do now is so vastly different. And the expense, I mean, the fact of the matter is there is so much open source and free software out there that would have cost hundreds of dollars even, you know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And, you know, some of my kids use Audacity from time to time. They'll come in and say, hey, I cut this, you know, track last night or whatever. And it's like, okay, you know, like that's awesome. And so that's one of the things I love about the, you know, teaching media is there's so many different kids and people from so many different walks of life, and it intersects with so many different things that, you know, like you can find a common ground within, you know, that kind of arena. And so, you know, it's like different pieces of software, different skill sets, everything else like that comes together to put these productions together, and everybody has their strengths and everybody has their things that they like to do and are good with, and then their weaknesses and they want to stay away from. And it's kind of cool because you get to work with so many, you know, different kinds of people doing different kinds of things. And you know, it's just fun, you know, and I'm sure, you know, like you get into something like Audacity or something like Premiere or Final Cut Pro or whatever you're using, and 3 hours later you're like, oh wow, where did the time go? It's just, you know, straight disappeared. So, you know, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that usually happens to me. The video software I use, Sony Vegas Pro, I use that, and when I'm throwing little videos and stuff together, the time just goes away like quick because it feels like I'm just sitting here for 15 minutes. And then 3 hours go by. It's like, where the heck did the time go, man?
Right. Yeah, and you definitely got to prioritize. You know, I found myself getting, you know, trapped down a rabbit hole where you're trying to get, you know, one little thing working exactly like you want. It's like, is anybody even going to notice that that's actually how it is, you know, and that kind of stuff. So, you know, sometimes you just have to kind of cut your losses and say, all right, it's good enough for now. Otherwise, you know, you'll never leave the computer screen. So
yeah, that's true. I've even had nights where I've actually fell asleep right here doing something. I kid you not. I was just trying to get something done one night, and I was working on something, and I got that done, and I said, well, you know what? I'm going to move on doing this. So I went on to move on to do my other thing. While I'm sitting there doing my other thing, I was so tired. I even like just was down like this with my head, and then all of a sudden I just doze off. And I kid you not, one night my head bounced off this desk, woke me up. I did not know where the heck I was at here for a minute. And dogs,
I've done the same. Yeah, rendering is not my friend sometimes, and you know, and I usually work on Shockwave early mornings and things like that before, you know, the day gets going. And so if it's like 5:30, 6 in the morning, and I'm working on editing, and then I start to render something, I'm like, oh, I'll wait for it to get done, and then before you know it, I'm out, and you know, I hear the notification that it's done or whatever, and it's a half hour, 45 minutes later or something like that. So
yeah, I would say it does take some time to throw something together, because when I've had projects before, I don't know if you've ever had this before, you get an idea in your head, okay, this is how I'm picturing it, but then when you start laying it out and you start kind of getting into it, and then when you look at it and you say to yourself, this is not like how I imagine it. You ever had those problems before?
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know, there's a couple different ways that I tackle that a little bit. A lot of times when I'm designing something, whether it's like, you know, the cover for Cold Blooded or Origins 2, or if I'm looking at like, you know, a show title, you know, for Shockwave or something like that, like if I start from scratch, like I've already lost the battle, because there's so many ideas and there's so many things that you can do. You know, you'll just get lost, and it's never going to like kind of create your vision. So I usually try to find some sort of like pattern or template or inspiration or something like that. And then obviously you add your own, you know, kind of like design to it and your own feel for it. But you at least use that for like a marker. So like, for example, with Cold Blooded, I used I want to say it was WrestleMania logo. I think it was WrestleMania 24. I used that as the starter. And then if you look at the Cold Blooded logo, I mean, there's some similarities, but it's extremely different, but at least it gives you a starting point. Right. Because otherwise I'll start with something, I'm like, oh, I want to do this. And then, if it doesn't turn out exactly what you want, like either you're disappointed or you want to scrap it or something like that, or, whatever. So I find like starting with it's somebody else's idea or kind of like a framework or a template has really been kind of like my go-to strategy for stuff like that, because I can usually pretty much get it close. So like if one of the guys has an idea, like I want to do this for my promo, or I want to do this for a t-shirt design, or I want to do this for a match or whatever, what do you think about this? It's like, fine, show me what your inspiration is, and then we can kind of go from that, because it's a heck of a lot easier to do that than trying to start from scratch.
Yeah. Using templates. I've used templates of an idea that I would see, and then I just build off of that, and then I just go in some crazy direction there.
Right.
And then sometimes it works, and sometimes it don't, and I'm like, damn, back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I hate losing that time, and I know when I'm teaching my kids, they hate losing that time, and they get real frustrated. But I always look at it as like, you have to have those things, and then you're learning something, even if it ends up being a failure and you have to scrap it or delete it or whatever. There's something, a lesson you learned, or what not to do, or something that you learn how to do faster for the next time you go and do it. Because I found that so many things that I know, I have gaps in my knowledge, but so many things that I know, I only know because I need it in that moment, and then I forget it, and then like 6 months later I'm like, oh yeah, I've done something like that before, and you can kind of go back. But there's so much stuff you can do that it's so easy to forget that something's even a possibility that you could do it like that. And and there's so many different like tips and tricks and everything else like that. Like I'm definitely watching tutorial videos on a constant basis, and just trying different things and trying to see what works and what doesn't. And that's half the fun, but it's also a pain in the butt sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, it's with video editing, or with videos like on YouTube and stuff for video editing. If I'm always hitting YouTube up when I was trying to get down how to do live streaming. Like when Facebook Live first came out with their live streaming, because it was all on the on phones, and then you could do it on a PC. So when I found out about that, when it was around 2016, after I first relaunched my show here, I looked into it, and I just started looking at the tutorials and everything and stuff. And when I got everything like down, and then when I try to do the first one, it failed because there was something that someone always forgot to mention. There's always that one little thing that makes a difference, and it was something in the audio settings where, because I was getting this big bad like echo coming back. And I'm like, where is this coming from? I'm looking all over the place. And then finally I went into the sound there, and I was like, well, what's the sound settings look like? And then when I pulled it up there, all of a sudden it was the web browser. It was causing echo. So I had to mute that and run everything in through the streaming software. And none of the video tutorials mentioned it. And I was like, I don't know why they've done that. Have you ever come across watching a tutorial yourself, and you go along, okay, this is how you do it, and then they don't mention that one little thing? Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, for sure, all the time. I mean, just because, like I said, I'm not, I started kind of late, obviously, with a lot of this stuff. And so, I'd watch a tutorial for a specific thing that I'm doing. Like, I love watching Andrew Kramer's do tutorials on videocopilot.net, and it's all After Effects, Adobe After Effects based. And he started kind of from scratch and really grew into, one of the best there is as far as Adobe's concerned. But I'll watch his tutorials, and he'll be like, okay, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And I don't even know how to do the first thing, and he's already on step 3, and I'm having to figure out step 1. And it's so, because he just does it so quickly and so fluidly, because he's just used to doing that thing, that I find myself having to stop and start the video constantly, just because it's like, all right, we're going to create a null object. And so I remember when I first okay, well, what's a null object? And it's just this new vocabulary and terminology that it's like, I never understand what that is and what it's supposed to do. And then I tell my kids, like, hey, you got to create a null object. I'm like, what's a null object? I'm like, how do you not know what a null object was? And then like 3 years ago, I had no idea what a null object was. So it's one of those things. It's like, it's just such a different world and such a different skill set that, that happens in every single video that, I find myself watching. Is there's something that they've probably been doing everything they do with their workflow. Like, everybody has a different workflow, and I'm sure there's better ways to do what I do, and I'm sure there's faster ways to do, Shockwave and edit Shockwave or do graphics or whatever. But this is what works for me, and so I do it that way. And what I do, somebody else could watch me do it and be like, I didn't know you could do that. Like, how did you not know you could do that? That's the way you do it, But everybody just kind of does their own thing, and it usually works out fairly similarly. So, I'm sure if I went and saw, what some of the other federations and organizations were doing as far as their video is concerned, I would probably be blown away by some of what they're doing, and then they'd come and see me and they'd be blown away by what we're doing. It's kind of like, it's interesting how that give and take, and we're all looking at the same goal with, different equipment and strategies and everything else like that. So,
yeah, it's amazing to see what other federations and stuff do for like their videos, but like for example, the opening of Shockwave, I love that. I love how that has come together and stuff. What idea that you had to use that you got or gathered?
Yeah, so going back to, videocopilot.net, they sell 3D software, called Element 3D. And, that's something I actually purchased a few years ago because I do the video board graphics at the high school. So, so I wanted it for that, for doing 3D text and 3D imaging and things like that. And so, I had it for a couple years and played around with it and did some stuff with it. And then, so really, when I'm doing something like the Shockwave title, that just comes from what tools do I have at my disposal and how do I know how to use those tools? So like, I've had Element for, I don't know, probably 3 years or so, and I've barely scratched the surface for how to use it. So it's kind of like, what model packs do I have? What texture packs do I have? What can I play around with? And then I kind of have barely touched the surface of like camera movement and doing stuff within, Adobe After Effects and stuff. So it's kind of like, what can I do and how well can I do it kind of thing. And so that just kind of came together where it's like, all right, I need a title. How long does it need to be? What's the best tool for the job? And then, what do I know, and you just kind of put it together. And so, one of the things I've been doing during stay at home is reworking some of those things and retweaking some of those things and stuff like that, because, I love this title sequence and everything, but like, even in this short time that we've been doing Shockwave, my skills have grown and my knowledge has grown, and, my idea of what it should be or could be and that kind of thing has grown. And so, always changing things, and, like with the lower thirds and things like that, what's the most efficient thing to do, what's the easiest thing to do from week to week, so you don't have to constantly change it and do things like that, what looks good regardless of what, whether they're in the ring or, doing their entrance and stuff like that, trying to play around with those things, but then also giving each person a little bit of character too, so that it's not just exactly the same regardless of wrestler or whatever. So
yeah, that's amazing. I like that. And like effect packs and stuff, they got so many that are just amazing. And when I was doing my own when I make my own intros, one of my old intros, I took a couple of effect packs and I stacked it on top of each other, and it came up with this creation, and it worked. And I said to myself, this is pretty good. I'm gonna roll with this one right here, because it's amazing what you can do with the effect packs when you just add stuff together. It's
right. Oh, it's unreal. And I've looked at, like, I'm not real big into sound. I've dabbled a little bit here and there, but watching how some people like recreate special effects and audio effects and things, like you look at like something like Final Cut Pro or even Audacity or something. If like you take this sound and then slow it down to this and then do this and then you get this whole different, and it's like, how did you even know to even like try to do that? And it's kind of this random combination, and recipes of things that you just wouldn't think would go together, and then all of a sudden it turns out like amazing, and like, okay, like, I guess I'll go with it, so. But yeah, like when I was growing up, we used to do videos and stuff for fun on camcorders and things, and back in those days you still had to like physically cut the tape and splice it together and do things like that, and or record from one VCR to another and that kind of stuff. So when I first started doing this again, in mid 2000, like 2010, 12, maybe 2013, I was like floored by the advancements and the entry points. Like, you can do amazing videos and have absolutely no idea what you're doing. It's gotten that simple. The entry point for how to do a lot of this stuff's really, really impressive. So
yeah, it is impressive. It is impressive how much technology has come and what you can actually do. And yeah, it is amazing when you're looking at someone doing something and they said, well, you do it like this and you get this effect here, and I'm in awe too, like, how the heck did you figure that out? And then you apply it. And I've also found stuff out accidentally when I was making a couple of graphics for the Everett Lee Show. I was messing around with a PNG file of myself, and I was trying to brighten it up, bring it, because it seemed a little bit dark, but it's such a good picture. So I was sitting there messing with the effects, trying to bring it up, and then I actually found out about the threshold effect to make it black and white. And as I said, man, this looks good. So it was a picture of me and Chris Carnage. So I used the threshold to make it look like black and white kind of effect, like I have on my profile picture. So I sent it to him. He said, dude, how'd you do that? I said, by accident, man. By accident. He's like, wow. And
well, and then, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like, and then you talk to somebody that does like screen printing or something for a living, and they do that all the time, because once you make it into black and white, then you can, create a silhouette for it and do screen printing with it and everything else like that. So it's interesting how many different, things kind of come together, and different things are used by different people for different purposes and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've like doing stuff for FGW Shockwave. Have you worked on something before and you're trying to get it a certain way, and then all of a sudden by accident you find out something that's like, oh, this is great, I'm going to keep this or use this later?
Yeah, there's been time, like, usually I wish I did this better early on, but just, like from an editing standpoint, like keeping track of, different highlights and keeping track of different moments and different matches and things like that. I wish I had done a better job of doing that. But like, as far as I keep all the raw footage that we have from all the shows, but then I also keep all the edited stuff too, just so I don't have to recut it if I don't have to. Right. When we first started, the idea was always to kind of start a show and put it up on YouTube or, whatever service, we could. But at first it was really more of like a training thing for the wrestlers, honestly. Like, we were just, I would film the stuff. There was no commentary. It was just like hard cams, just kind of stabilized or whatever. And then, just kind of having fun with it, just to kind of have a record of the matches. And then, they could go back and watch it and stuff like that. And then, when we started talking about the fact that we wanted to do a show and stuff, then it was kind of like, well, what would work best and how would we do this? Like, when I first started doing like the ringside camera, that was a huge step, because I had no desire to be ringside, because I just did not, first of all, I didn't want anybody to get hurt because I was there. Like, I am not quick by nature. And so my biggest fear is that, here these guys are going at it, 150%. And, I'm just standing there with my camera and they come flying in, and then one of them gets hurt because I'm slow as molasses. And then, then my second priority is I didn't want to get hurt. And so I did not want to be there. And so it took me, a little while to kind of get comfortable enough with, the ring movement and what they're doing and how, and their competitive nature and how things play out, and kind of, you can kind of see that stuff, just kind of learning and growing that way, and then getting in there, understanding like where's the best place to be and how is it, shooting it and everything else like that. And then once we did that, then Anthony and I, he's the guy who does the ring cam now, trying to figure out the aperture and the color balance, the white balance and stuff for the cameras and things, because as soon as you move the camera in there, everything changes. If you zoom in a little bit and your aperture closes, it doesn't let as much light in. Okay, well, now it's too dark. Well, now if you zoom out and the aperture opens up a little bit, now all of a sudden it's too bright. So finding those balances and finding out what settings work and everything else like that, sometimes it's interesting. I mean, it could be something where the number of people that are there, or even what they're wearing on a given night, like the balance of the light and, everything else that happens, like everything affects everything else. And so kind of understanding that and seeing how those things work together and in concert, like it's a constant learning experience. And so every week it looks a little bit different. Every week we try to get a little bit better. And I think that's one of the things that I think has been most interesting about doing these best of shows lately is, you can see stuff from our first show and then you see stuff from our last show, and it's like it's the same people involved, it's the same equipment involved for the most part, and but it looks so much different just because we're just kind of learning and problem solving and everything else on a weekly basis. And working with Brian and working with Cody and working with Corey and things like that, it's just been a true pleasure, because it's very collegial, and we're just trying to figure out what's the best way to put out Shockwave, what's going to help FGW the most, what's going to put out the best product, what's going to make it most interesting for the fans, and the best for them to see, and that kind of thing. And so it's just little tweaks and little changes here and there. 1 week somebody might bring in a piece of equipment that we didn't have before that they found at an auction, or I find something on eBay or something, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, now we can do this and this and this that we couldn't do before, and it makes it that much better. So
that's amazing there. Just FGW, they've only been around for a year, and you're pretty much, as the federation, as promotion grows, you're growing with them as well. So that's amazing right there.
Yeah, I think it's very they always say that I make them look good, but obviously, like, there's only so much I can do. If they weren't doing what they do, I couldn't do what I do, and if I don't do what I do, they can, what I mean? It's very symbiotic in that way, and so I'm not coming from any sort of like, major, independent wrestling background or anything like that. I'm coming at this from a very, different angle. I grew up watching wrestling and stuff like that, but hadn't really been, keeping up with it over the years and stuff. And so, like, it took me a little while to kind of get used to it and comfortable and that kind of thing. And, and just trying to figure out, like I said, what's the best way to promote them. And again, it comes down to a time thing too. It's like, obviously this is just something I'm doing, on the side, cause I, love working with these guys and, love working with FGW, and I love doing it's just a fun creative outlet and things like that. But, obviously it's not my full-time job. So it's kind of like, what's the best thing that we can do with the time and resources we have available. And obviously we could always do more and we could always do better, but sometimes there's just limitations on time and resources that we have to fight.
Yeah It's just like with FGW, Fridays they have shows, and you pretty much record everything, and then over the weekend or during that time period, you pretty much go through the footage and you piece together, because one thing I like about how everything's pieced together, how you piece everything together, is you piece everything together storyline wise. You take everything here and there, and you have that story that you're telling, and also showing what the match is, and then you're throwing in other matches here and there in between that fills that story that's continuing. But you also, it showcases the talent there at FGW. And one of the things I like is how you've how I've mentioned this in the last few weeks, but what I like is how you piece everything together, when just the angles and how it's cut. Because from the hard cam, what I've noticed, what I like is from the hard cam, you got action going on, and when they're about to do a move or they execute a move, and then all of a sudden you got the camera guy on the ground there, and it cuts right to it, and it's just pieced together. And that's one of the first things I've noticed, because over the years, talking to independent film directors and producers on my show, just hearing how they talk about editing and cut and stuff. So when I watch a movie, I started noticing things, and then when I watch FGW, at first I'm like, wow, I was like, this is shot really good in high def. I've not seen a show like this. And then I'm watching the matches. They're coming off the ropes or doing something, and then while they're executing it, then you're right there and you catch it. I'm like, wow. I love how that's pieced together. My team, I mean, I say my team, it's basically Anthony and me, we're doing the filming. So I usually run the hard cam, and then Anthony's in the ring. Well, Anthony's got a background, like he's, training it with Cody and things like that. So I think he intuitively knows, where to be and when and things like that. Like he understands kind of like, like every match has its ebb and flow, and you can kind of tell, whether it's the crowd or just kind of like the wrestlers, energy level, facial expression, things like that. There's always an ebb and flow to a match. And so I think that, we sense that and we understand it, and, can try to capture, what's going to happen. It's like, when they're up on the top rope and they're, doing the 10 count and they get to punch 9 or whatever, something's obviously they're not going to be staying there much longer. So it's time to start moving, and it's time to start, adjusting and things like that. But, even then, it's like that's something that takes time, and so when you're looking at what have we done, 25 episodes, 20, somewhere in that neighborhood, like it's just a matter of, the software I use, Premiere Pro, I just dump the footage in there. It lines it up based on the audio. It syncs it up. And so then I just do like basically a video switcher, like 1 and 2 on the keyboard, and it just switches back and forth, which I didn't have that originally. And so it saved me a ton of time. But, it's like, when somebody goes up for a suplex, or you see somebody going up, I can see Anthony's angle and I can see my angle, and I can pick and choose which one's going to be the best one for the shot we're going for. And at first, like I said, it was a learning experience for me. It was a learning experience for Anthony. A lot of times it's, okay, well, what shot isn't blurry? That's the shot we went with. And so, what shot doesn't suck completely? And that's what we went, so we went with the one that was the whatever. And sometimes the guys would be like, hey, is there any way we can make it so it's not blurry here? I'm like, yeah, if we knew what we were doing, none of it would be blurry, but we're trying to figure this out here, and so, and especially, just what I've noticed is in watching, the high end, professional wrestling, the WCW, WWE matches, and they move that hard cam way more than I thought they did. When I've gone back and watched some of their matches, they stay on the hard cam a lot. They just have much more space, stretch out and, zoom in as necessary and things like that. And so I think that's, sometimes that's to our benefit because we're there. I'm doing the hard cam and I'm still only 10 to 15 feet away, and then Anthony's literally like 2 feet, so I think it allows us to get some really cool things that you may not otherwise get to see. Yeah, that's amazing how he's down there and like you said, just getting the shots, and then you're going through looking at the hard cam shots, and you're looking at his shots and just trying to line up everything. And I think that's really great that he's trained and he kind of knows, okay, I'm going to be over here for this shot, I'm going to get here for this shot, and then you got your footage, and it works so well. It
does, yeah. And he's, like I said, when I first started doing the Shockwave episodes and he was on the ring cam and everything else, because early on, like, the hard cam was just sitting by itself, and then I did the ring cam. And so then when Anthony came in, I found myself using the hard cam and then cutting to Anthony's when I could or when it worked. And then as he's grown and he's gotten better, I stick with his camera as much as humanly possible. And then when I need to pull back to get more of what's happening, then I pull back to mine. So I would say it's interesting over the episodes of Shockwave, the percentage of hard cam versus ringside cam, it was much higher as far as the hard cam was concerned. And then, as weeks went on, it's much more of a percentage of the ring cam, and then the hard cam, I'll use it as sparingly as possible.
Right. That's amazing. Again, I just and even the sound I've noticed, because you dabbled with sound, and as the progression of the episodes, I've noticed it's grown. And you've grown too, like as you mentioned, with how the promotion has grown within the last year. And someone said to me, I mentioned him. I said you can check out FGW Shockwave. And so they checked out that episode. They said, man, they've been around for a while. I was like, no, they've only been around a year. And it was like, well, man, they got all the the right things to shoot it and stuff. I was like, yeah, but if you look at all the footage and how they do it, they got it set right, and it has that old studio setting, which I've mentioned before. That's I love that. So you said growing up, when you watching wrestling back in the day, and like you said, like WCW, and did you watch any of NWA? Did you watch any of that?
A little bit, but very, very, very sparingly, just because of access and things like that. No, and I primarily watched, I would say, like midnight. I mean, I grew up watching, Saturday Night Main Event and stuff like that when I was sleeping over at friends' houses and things. Yeah. But then definitely, like, I would say mid to late 90s, early 2000s, that's when I was, into it probably most of all or whatever. I still remember I lived out in Oakland, California for a while. I went to a WCW Thunder taping back in the Goldberg, days and things like that. And that was just a phenomenal experience. But then I've been to, house shows at the Air Arena, and went to, one of the Brian Pillman shows in the late 90s and things. I mean, it's just, but then life happens or whatever. And honestly, when WCW got bought out by WWE, and I didn't really make that transition, and it was just not for me anymore. And I kind of just had outgrown it and things. And when I met up with, Brian and Cody and the FGW guys, one of the things I love about FGW is it is very old school, it's got that vibe to it. And it's very traditional. And I love that, and I think it resonates with the fans too. I mean, I think, we're kind of all on the same page as far as what wrestling is, what wrestling can be, what it should be, what it's for, all those things. And, and not that what other organizations do is wrong or anything like that. It's just whatever your preference is and whatever your taste is. And, I'm just really, I really like where, the kind of the niche that FGW finds itself in, as far as a good balance between, kind of old school wrestling and, newer talent and things like that. So,
yeah, that's one thing I enjoyed the most is the old school feel to it, the old school storylines. You got you got classic good guys, classic bad guys, just the formula. It's nothing new that they've not been telling or doing in professional wrestling for years. But they pretty much stick to that there, which I think is great. And you said that, Brian Levick, the owner of Future Great Wrestling, he's also the owner of Future Great Comics. How long and how did you meet Brian Levick? How did that come about?
And that's actually how I got involved in FGW. I mean, it's when I tell people that I do this, they just kind of like laugh and look at me weird. Like they just don't understand how, like an English teacher that's working on his doctorate at Miami and things like that films wrestling on the weekends. It's kind of like this alter ego, I guess. And so, but yeah, I went into Future Great Comics, like, I want to say it wasn't that long ago, maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 at most or something, over the summer, just to kind of check it out and see, like, there was a couple of books that, I collected comics in like maybe 2005 through 2007, and then I just kind of stopped. And so, but there was a couple books that looked interesting that I thought maybe I'd pick up. So I went in to see, and, and Brian he's an amazing small business owner. Like his connection and ability to build, relationships with his clientele is really phenomenal. Like I've gone into a number of comic shops and had zero relationships with people, and either, not that they're condescending, but there's just this kind of vibe, like I just never felt like I belonged there or anything like that. And like the minute I walked into, Future Great Comics, it was like I felt like I belonged there. He was interested in who I was and what I was doing there, what books I was interested in, if he could help with anything. He was very, very, very personable. And that resonated really well with me. And so, just over time, going to the shop, buying comics, different things like that, we talked about, the fact that I taught a media class. He's like, oh, by the way, do you think some of your kids might be interested in helping out? Like, we're doing this wrestling promotion, and that was, like, and the kids being interested in it turned into, they were not, but I still wanted to help Brian out. And so I'm like, yeah, I'll help it, and do whatever. Did I predict and or know how much time and energy I was going to ultimately invest in it? No, but and there's times where I'm like, why am I doing this again? but no, I do love it, and it's been fun. It's definitely a time commitment, and it's definitely an energy commitment. But I definitely don't regret being involved with it. Like I said, Brian's great to work with, Cody's great to work with. All the wrestlers are great to work with and stuff. Just when push comes to shove, like if I didn't enjoy the people at FGW, I would just walk away. It's not, right. Like I said, I'm doing this because I want to do it. And I'm doing it because of them, and because, they appreciate me and I appreciate what they're trying to do. And I want to see where we can take it. But at the end of the day, like, they're all just phenomenal people that, I love seeing on a weekly basis. And that's been one of the worst parts about this, stay at home, order and things like that is not getting to hang out with them, on a weekly basis. Cause, they've definitely become, friends and family, and sometimes friends and family, argue and stuff and they disagree. Obviously the wrestlers settle that in the ring a lot of times, but, like I just don't air them or cut all their good shots out or something like that if I have a beef, but but for the most part, like, I definitely miss those guys and miss working with them and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know they're all pretty much itching to get back in the ring, and things are starting to slowly get back to some kind of normal pace and normal for everybody. I know down in here they're starting to slowly open things up here in Daytona Beach. I mean, one of the wrestling promotions that lived like 5 minutes from me, or about 15 minutes from me, they ran their first show in probably since we had the state had a lockdown. They ran it last weekend and it did really good. And then this upcoming weekend they're running another one, which I'm going to be checking out. But
are they doing it with fans and everything?
From what I understand, yeah, they're doing it with fans, but I don't know how they're doing it. So I'm gonna go check it out next weekend just to see how they're gonna be running things and how everything is. But I am curious about that, but I've been itching myself to go see live wrestling, man.
Right.
I'm just want to get out and just do that.
I have a feeling that first show back when we're allowed to be at capacity or whatever, that looks like, I have a feeling that's going to be a hot ticket. I think the FGW fans are very dedicated and very loyal. You see the same people week after week, and, you talk to them during intermission or after the show and stuff like that, and they're very dedicated to FGW, and they have a really strong bond and relationship with the wrestlers and with each other and things. And so that community, that's one of the things we've tried to put out some new content weekly, with some of these, best of shows and some of the skits and, bits and stuff that the wrestlers are putting together, just because we just missed that connection and the fans missed that connection. So trying to do stuff, I know this weekend, they're doing FGW bingo. They've been promoting that and things like that. And I know they're planning on doing some sort of live auction or something at some point. And so it's just fun. You know what I mean? I don't think any of these guys would do it, and I know I wouldn't do it. I don't think if it wasn't fun. It's got to be fun first. And obviously there's sacrifices to be made and there's pain to be felt and things like that. But fun has to be at the center of all this, because otherwise it's just not worth it.
Yeah, I agree. It has to be fun. Since you mentioned about how they've putting stuff together for the fans, I enjoyed that social distancing video together, how it was put together and stuff. I know you had a hand in that.
Actually on that one, I just had to put that into Shockwave. That was actually done by, there's a couple of people that as we've gotten bigger and done the social distancing and stuff, there's only so much that I can do from home and things. Right. So there's actually a few people that have done some of those videos and things like that, and they do a fantastic job and things. So and so it's definitely been a team effort, and some of the guys are really good at putting some of those videos together and organizing the wrestlers and getting those guys together and doing those like that. I don't know what they're all called, the different challenges and stuff, but those I'm glad I did not have to edit some of those, let's put it like that, because they would definitely be challenging, especially when you're taking different technology and different, people's different footage, and, somebody might have been shooting on an iPhone and somebody else might have been shooting on an Android and somebody else might have been shooting on an iPad or something, taking all that and putting it all together. They did a phenomenal job. So yeah, my hat's off to them.
Yeah, that is amazing how they put that all together. I really did enjoy that right there, how everything was put together like that. I was laughing my butt off, man, because I was they're having a good time, and this is something that people will look back and watch and enjoy themselves. They definitely will enjoy that.
Agreed. And I think, so even some of those messages to fans that they did where it was less fun, more serious, just some of the heartfelt messages and stuff, when I'm editing, Shockwave and things, and those are getting put together, I'm getting emotional editing, and I know the wrestlers were getting emotional filming and the fans were getting emotional. It's, wrestling allows for all of those emotions to be expressed and, produced, and it becomes a little cathartic. But I think everybody needed that. I think the wrestlers needed to communicate with the fans, and I think the fans needed to hear that from the wrestlers. And, again, that community and that bond is really, really, really strong. And so, trying to make sure that it gets maintained, during this time is super, super, super important.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is important because fans from what I've seen from FGW Shockwave, just the fans that come in there, and they enjoy it, man. They enjoy it, and watching all the footage without the commentary and hearing the fans' reaction, the fans get behind it.
Oh yeah,
and it's amazing that there in Hamilton with having FGW, because I mentioned this before on previous episodes when I talked to FGW talent, that when Robin Nelson sent to me a thing about when it was first starting up and there were some problems, and there was a petition. So I went ahead and I signed that petition to make sure Future Great Wrestling can run, and it worked out great. And the rest is pretty much history.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was definitely an interesting, I was on the periphery of things at that point and stuff like that. And it was interesting how all that went down. And I think, honestly, like, it was almost like a forged in fire moment. And I think it did solidify a lot of, the bond that was there. It wasn't just, here's this wrestling organization, let's go check it out. I mean, it's like people had to like fight for it, and so I think it gave a lot of people ownership of it, and from the start, and I think it helped a lot of people kind of buy into it and things like that. And I feel like the Hamilton community does support the FGW at this point, and other organizations and things like that. The fans, again, FGW is my only experience with independent wrestling, but just in talking with some of the fans and some of the people that come in from out of town and things like that, they're always singing FGW's praises and things, and saying like, this is definitely the place to be. It's definitely an amazing production value. It's amazing, arena setting. It's amazing, like everything is geared towards making the fan experience like as good as humanly possible, and the wrestlers are accessible, and they are amazing with the kids that come in, and it's a very family friendly environment and things like that. Like, I can't, obviously I'm there anyway filming and stuff like that, but if I wasn't, I would definitely be attending as often as possible, just because, it's just such a fun, 2.5 hour show they put on. Like it's almost hard to believe that they're able to do that on a weekly basis, just put out high quality content, high quality stories, like high quality, action, connection with the fan, and, not have it be stale, and have it keep going and be powerful and be fun and be entertaining week after week after week. It's a consistently good product, just week in and week out.
It is. And I can't wait for Future Great Wrestling to get back up, and you get out there, you and Anthony, and just start recording and putting together some great episodes. And before we start winding this down here, got a couple of non-FGW questions to ask you here. You mentioned going to Future Great Comics, being a fan of comics. What have you been reading? What's the latest thing you've been reading? Or keeping up with?
Yeah, I'm definitely all over the place with my comic collection. But actually, like, I would say, Batman is definitely my favorite comic book hero by far. And so, just been trying to keep up with it, the Detective Comics for sure. And then, some of the stuff that DC's been putting out lately has been really interesting. Like, I really like their Deceased storyline, and, some of the things they did with like Event Leviathan and stuff like that. I enjoyed reading those. I've been trying to branch out a little bit into some of the independent stuff, but, like I said, I'm all over the place. I'm a big Star Wars nerd and everything else like that. So I was collecting Star Wars comics for a while, and I was collecting Spider-Man's my second favorite character, and so between Batman and Spider-Man, I've got my hands full. But obviously, you branch out and stuff. So my comics are lined up over in this direction. I won't show you because staying at home is not fun for me, and so I'm going through a reorg, and so it's just a mess over here of just different stuff. But yeah,
that's good. That's good. I'm pretty much like there for a while. I did collect comic books there. When I was a kid, I pretty much had different issues and different stuff. When I was about 11, 12. Actually, yeah, it was about 12, 13. Thor was my favorite. I had issue 432, where Thor kills Loki and he gets banished to Mephisto, and then Eric Masters becomes the new Thor, but it's in with the mind of Eric Masters. I had the issues after, at that and then afterwards, and then they're about 2005, 2006. I jumped back into 2004 to about 2007. I jumped back into collecting comics again, and there for a while I was buying like different ones, and I forget which story arc was going on, and it would be in this comic, and you have to buy this comic and that one.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I can't keep up with this, because then I'm wanting to get into this and this, and so I quit collecting for a while, and then about the only thing I do read with comics now is I love graphic novels. I love those. I haven't picked it up and read it yet, but I figured this would be a good time to do it in between everything going on. I got the Fight Club 2 graphic novel, the hardback cover.
Nice. Very cool. That'd be fun. Yeah, I need to check that out. Actually, I have a tendency to buy more than I read, and so a lot of times lately I've been, I've got this stack. I'm like, I need to read that, and then it gets daunting, and so I'm like, I'll do it later. And I like to read a whole storyline at once if I can help it, kind of thing. But yeah, I was definitely into comics around that same time, like that 2004 to 2007, and yeah, like that was when they were doing, I know, House of M and with some of the X-Men and stuff, and then they did Civil War right around then too. And so like, yeah, that's when it kind of got a little crazy as far as like, I'm like, I don't know who these characters are, but I'm gonna buy it just because it's connected. And I'm like, I had to take a step back at that point for financial and time reasons and things. But yeah, so then I got back into it with Brian, and it kind of exploded a little bit again or whatever, and some of my tastes have changed, but dialing back a little bit. But I like collecting some of the comics from the I was just reading some of the Stranger Things comics and stuff like that, because I love Stranger Things, and I like being able to kind of focus on different aspects of the universe without having to go to too much trouble and things like that. So it's just a nice fun escape, for a little bit of time on a daily basis or whatever.
Yeah, it is, and I have the collection. I didn't get the newest one because I think it's out or it's been out of Kick-Ass. I have the Kick-Ass collection, man. I love the Kick-Ass collection. I love the story, and I was been a fan of the movies, the 2 movies they put out. But that's one collection there, and then there was different ones I'd pick up there. For a while there, I had the Hellblazer graphic novels. I've got a few of the comics for sure, and that's the thing. Like I do have a tendency to go off of things that I've watched on TV. Like Umbrella Academy was amazing, and I would love to go back and pick up some of those. But it's like, do I really want to invest the time and energy and money that goes into that? Preacher, I watched that. Really, I loved that show, and I would love to go back and get the comics. But again, it's like, it's after you've obviously they've gone through so many issues and stuff, even Walking Dead or whatever, I've collected all of those either in compendium or single issues and things like that, and I would like to go back and get them all as single issues, but the time and energy and money that would require is way outside of a teacher's salary for sure. Oh yeah, it is. I know, which is pretty cool. Is you can buy like the whole section of the storylines they have. I have one of them. I think for the first one, which had the first, I believe it was like the 5 issues, the first 5 or 6 issues or something like that. But I've always wanted to go back and get like the one that just has the whole the whole story of that section through the comics.
Yeah. Half Price Books was my friend on that one. So I think there's there's 3 compendiums. I have the first 3 compendiums, and that's I think the first 140 issues or something like that, all broken up or whatever. But even then, I wouldn't have wanted to pay full price for that. So luckily, I was able to get it at Half Price Books and save myself a little bit of money on that one. So
that's cool. Yeah, it does get expensive though, but it's so good. It's so good. It's like it gets addicting there at times, and you're like, hey, I got to step away from this for a minute.
Right, I know. And they'll come back to certain, angles and storylines eventually anyway, so you can always, take a breather and come back to it. But yeah, no, it is kind of, and that's kind of how I operate. It's like I'm on these different ends of the spectrum, so like I'll go from, working on my dissertation to working on an episode of Shockwave, and I'll go from reading, some sort of like, critical media literacy book that I'm using for my research, and then right below it is, an issue of, I don't know, Savage Avengers or something like that, and so, I like being balanced and well-rounded with all of that stuff, because if you're too far on either of those sides, I think you're in for a bad time. So, I like having that sort of duality and sort of balance in my life for sure.
Nice. That's excellent. I do want to thank you for taking time out today and coming on here and discussing FGW Shockwave, discussing comics. This has been great. I've enjoyed it, and I know you're on social media. You want to plug any social media of yourself?
I'm good for myself, but I will recommend everybody go out and follow the Facebook page for FGW, because they're always posting new content. Jackson Breeze, is as much as him and I don't get along sometimes, like he's always posting his weekly updates, and the guys are putting out their promos and stuff on a weekly basis and things. So definitely follow Future Great Wrestling on Facebook. And I know we've been trying to get a bigger presence on, Twitter and Instagram, different things like that, trying to do some new stuff. I think you're going to see some new things when we start to, one of the things that happens when you're on break like this is, the ideas can start to flow and you actually have time to do some things and make some changes and stuff. So I think you're going to start to see some different things. So, just stay tuned into FGW stuff, and, just, keep tuning in, like, share, and subscribe. Like, it's word of mouth is critical for us. And so, just if everybody shares it out with the friends that they have and say, hey, check this out. Like, I love the fact that we have people in Florida, and we have people in California, we have people out of the country, watching FGW. It's great. And so, it'd be awesome just to keep expanding that fan base. And, so just, follow FGW, and well, that'll be good enough for me. So.
Excellent. Again, I want to thank you for taking time out today and coming on, and of course, FGW Shockwave every Wednesday, 7 p.m.
7 p.m. So I just finished the rough cut for this week's episode. So, tune in, and we've got another good best of this week, and we'll have best ofs for the next couple weeks, I'm sure, and we'll see what happens from there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on, and that's pretty much it for the Everett Lee Show. And next week on the program, I have a couple great guests that's lined up. I will be talking with later on this week with Cody Hawk of Future Great Wrestling. Keep up to date with what Everett Lee does on Podcast Network, your top source for independent podcasting. Head over to podcasty.net for great content and great shows over on the website. Hit them up on Facebook, Podcast Network. Give them a thumbs up and a follow. Send them a tweet over on Twitter at PodcastCNet. Subscribe to their YouTube channel for video podcast over on Podcast Network, and on Twitch, Podcast City Network. You want more Everett Lee? Then hit me up on Facebook. Give me a thumbs up and a follow, Everett Lee Show. Twitter at TheEverettLeeShow, Instagram Everett Lee Show, and audio portions of this podcast and previously released podcast. Head over to YouTube, The Everett Lee Show, Stitcher Radio, iTunes, Podbean, and iHeartRadio. Everyone have a good week. We'll see you again next time for another episode of Everett Lee Show.